My name is Miles Grant, 38, and for a full year I gave up every weekend to babysit my nephew, Logan, while his parents, my sister-in-law Miranda and her husband Brent, worked unpredictable hours. It wasn't occasional. It was expected. They'd drop Logan off like a pizza order, sometimes without even knocking, and I'd just take him in. No questions asked. Because that's what family does, right? You swallow your own plans, your own time, your own rest, and you say yes. You smile when they call it a favor instead of what it really is, free childcare. And maybe, deep down, I convinced myself that's how family worked. Give and give and give, and maybe you'd get something back when you needed it. But that's not how it happened. Every Friday night, I'd watch their headlights swing into my driveway, Logan's small face pressed against the window, half asleep. Miranda would barely say hello, just unbuckle him and carry his backpack in like she was clocking out of a shift. Brent always stayed in the car, engine running, radio low. I'd wave. He'd give me a nod. And then they'd be gone, leaving Logan blinking at me, like I was supposed to transform into his entire world until Sunday evening. And I did. I took him fishing. I taught him how to ride a bike. I cheered at his soccer games. I made sure he brushed his teeth and took his asthma meds. I was good at it, too better than I thought I'd be. But good didn't seem to matter to anyone except Logan. There was a Saturday morning when I woke up to the smell of burnt pancakes, Logan standing on a stool, spatula in hand, grinning like he'd conquered the world. I made breakfast, Uncle Miles. He beamed. And in that moment, the exhaustion, the resentment, the sheer drain of being the designated backup parent, it all softened. I'd ruffled his hair and told him he was a champion chef. He'd giggled, and we'd sat at the kitchen table, the pancakes blackened on one side but perfect in their own way. That's what kept me going, I guess. Those moments. Then came the day I needed a favor. I had a work trip, 3 days, that's all. Just 3 days. Alyssa, my wife, couldn't get off work, so I asked Miranda. Could she swing by the house and feed Zeke, our 10-year-old Labrador, while I was away? It wasn't much. Just scoop some food, let him out to do his business, refill his water. She looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. I'm not your assistant, she said. Like she'd never asked me for anything. Like Logan hadn't practically lived at my place for a year. I was stunned, but I tried to laugh it off. Come on, Miranda, it's just 3 days, I said. She crossed her arms, tilted her head. It's not my job to take care of your dog. I turned to Alyssa for backup, but she just shrugged. You can't expect people to owe you, she said. Like I'd kept a ledger of every late night, every soccer game, every meal, every story time. But I hadn't. Until that night. That night, sitting in the living room with Zeke asleep at my feet, I started counting. Every time they'd dropped Logan off without asking. Every dinner I'd skipped with Alyssa because I had to be home with him. Every time I'd stayed up with him when he had nightmares. Every time Brent had given me that curt nod, like a man paying a debt. And then I thought about Zeke, his loyalty, his quiet devotion, how he'd sit by the door every Sunday evening waiting for Logan to come back, tail thumping with hope. That was the night everything snapped. I felt it inside me. A click, like a switch thrown. I wasn't the helper anymore. I wasn't the backup parent, the default babysitter, the doormat. I was a man who had given more than he should have, and when he needed one small thing, he'd been told he didn't matter. That's what family does, they'd say. They lean on each other. But where was the leaning now? Where was the reciprocity? I looked at Alyssa, and she was already in the kitchen, washing a glass, humming like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just realized something fundamental about the people I loved. Maybe they didn't love me the same way I loved them. Maybe they loved the things I did for them more than they loved me. That night, I walked to the garage, grabbed Zeke's leash, and took him for a walk. The air was sharp, the stars hidden behind clouds. Zeke trotted beside me, his head low, his eyes watching me like he could sense the change. I talked to him like he was the only one who'd listen. It's not about the dog, buddy, I said. It's about being seen. About respect. He wagged his tail slowly, and I thought about all the times I'd put myself second, third, even last. I thought about every time I'd let myself be the afterthought. And I decided, right then, that I was done. I was done being the easy one. I was done being the default. I was done being the guy who never said no. I came back inside, unhooked Zeke's leash, and gave him a treat. He curled up in his crate, content. Alyssa was already in bed, the light off, her breathing slow and even. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the darkened room, feeling the weight of every sacrifice I'd made for people who saw me as a convenience. And for the first time in a long time, I let the anger settle in my chest like a stone. Not rage, just the cold, hard knowledge that I was alone in this. I couldn't count on Miranda. I couldn't count on Brent. I couldn't even count on Alyssa. I could only count on me. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and sat down at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed, a text from Miranda. Can you watch Logan next weekend? Brent's working late. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. And then I put the phone down. I didn't respond. I just let the silence speak for me. Because maybe, finally, it was time for them to feel what it was like to be left hanging. Maybe, finally, it was time for me to stop showing up when nobody else would. I came home to silence that night. The kind that presses against your skin, that tells you the world has changed while you were away. Zeke's crate sat open in the middle of the living room like a small, empty confession. His bowls, one for water, one for kibble, dry as dust. I dropped my bag and called his name, my voice catching on a tremor I didn't want to admit was panic. Nothing. No tail thump against the floorboards, no eager bark, no click of claws on tile. Just that quiet, like a room after a funeral. My gut tightened. I'd only been gone for a couple of days. Work trip, nothing big. I'd left his leash hanging on the hook by the door, his toys piled neatly in the basket. Everything was ready. Miranda had said she'd swing by. Alyssa had said she'd handle it if Miranda didn't. And yet here I was, staring at a crate that should have been closed, a dog that should have been waiting, and the kind of emptiness that felt like betrayal. On the side of the crate, taped with the precision of a surgeon's bandage, was a single sheet of white paper. The thick black marker bled through the cheap paper, the letters harsh and uneven. Next time, pay for a sitter. My stomach flipped. I reached for the note with a hand that didn't feel like mine, my fingers cold and shaking. The words blurred, and I realized it wasn't just anger. It was heartbreak. Because that wasn't just a message. That was a statement. A confession that the people I'd trusted to care for Zeke, my family, had failed him. And me. I moved like a man possessed, every muscle tensed and trembling. I searched the house like a madman. Kitchen, bedrooms, even the bathroom, calling his name over and over again. But he wasn't there. I even checked the closets, like maybe he'd gotten stuck or scared or sick. But the house was empty, hollow, like someone had taken a piece of me and hidden it somewhere I couldn't reach. I fumbled for my phone, dialing Alyssa first. She didn't pick up. Straight to voicemail, her chirpy greeting sounding like an insult. I tried Miranda next. Nothing. Brent. The same. I felt the blood in my ears, my pulse a steady drumbeat of rage and disbelief. I wasn't crazy. Dogs don't write notes. And yet, here I was, holding a piece of paper that felt like a slap across the face. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at that note like it held the answers. Next time, pay for a sitter. Like I'd been cheap. Like I'd been asking for too much. Like feeding and watering a loyal, loving creature was too big an ask for the people I'd trusted. My hand shook as I folded the note and set it beside me. Zeke's bowls stared back at me, dry and mocking. I thought about every time I'd watched Logan without complaint. Every time I'd rearranged my schedule to accommodate Miranda and Brent. Every time Alyssa had smiled and said, family first. And now, when I'd asked for one small thing, they'd abandoned Zeke and me. I stood up, shoving my chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, slamming it behind me. The drive to Miranda and Brent's house felt like a fever dream, red lights bleeding into green, the street lights blurring at the edges. I didn't care about traffic laws or speed limits. I cared about Zeke. I cared about the betrayal that had settled like a stone in my chest. When I pulled into their driveway, the house was dark except for a sliver of light coming from the kitchen window. I didn't bother knocking. I walked right in, my boots heavy on the hardwood, each step an accusation. Miranda, I shouted, my voice hoarse. No answer. I moved through the house like a storm, calling her name, calling Brent's, my fist clenched at my sides. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled whimper. My heart stuttered. I followed the sound, my steps quickening, my breath sharp and ragged. In their basement, behind the laundry room door, I found him. Zeke. My boy. His ribs stuck out like the bars of a cage, his eyes dull and sunken. He lay on a ragged towel, shivering. No food. No water. Just the smell of dust and neglect. My knees buckled, and I dropped beside him, gathering him in my arms. He let out a weak, grateful sigh, pressing his nose into my chest like he'd finally found home. My hands trembled as I stroked his fur, my throat tight with a grief I hadn't known I could feel for an animal or for the people who'd failed him. I didn't say a word. Not to Miranda, who stood at the top of the stairs with her arms crossed, her eyes wide with something between guilt and fear. Not to Brent, who hovered behind her, his mouth a thin line. I looked them both in the eye, no tears, no yelling, just a look that said everything. They thought I'd do nothing. They thought I'd swallow it like I'd swallowed every other insult, every other slight. They were wrong. I carried Zeke up the stairs, his head resting against my shoulder. As I passed Miranda, I felt her hand brush my arm, a feeble attempt at comfort or explanation. I pulled away. Words were useless now. I opened the door, stepped into the night, and breathed in the cold air like it was the first honest thing I'd felt all week. Zeke whimpered once, then fell quiet, his body trembling in my arms. I set him gently in the passenger seat of my truck, his eyes closing as if he finally felt safe. I climbed in beside him, started the engine, and drove away from that house like I was leaving a battlefield. Because I was. And I knew this was just the beginning. That note had started a fire I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. A fire that would burn through every lie, every betrayal, every time someone had looked at me and seen nothing but a convenience. And I wasn't going to let it die. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The thin skin stretched white under the dashboard light. The engine hummed low, and Zeke whimpered beside me, his head on my thigh. Every few seconds I'd glance down, reassure him with a slow, gentle stroke over his ears. It felt like I was trying to soothe both of us, calm the tremor in my chest that threatened to become a roar. The house loomed ahead, Brent and Miranda's suburban castle, 2 stories of half-finished siding and a porch that sagged like a mouthful of lies. I parked at the curb and killed the headlights, letting the dark settle in like a verdict. I wasn't here to scream. I wasn't here to cry. I was here for the truth, and maybe a reckoning. Zeke let out a low whine as I got out, his body tense. "I'll be right back, buddy," I whispered. He didn't believe me. I didn't blame him. I barely believed myself. The front walkway felt like a gauntlet. The porch light burned out, shadows gathering in corners like conspirators. I knocked once, twice, then let myself in. The door wasn't even locked. Miranda's voice drifted from the living room, brittle and sweet. "Miles? Is that you?" "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "We need to talk." She looked up from the couch, a magazine in hand, her legs crossed at the knee. Her eyes widened, flicked to the clock, then back to me. "It's late. What's this about?" "Zeke," I said. "Where is he?" A practiced look of confusion crossed her face. "Zeke? I told you I couldn't." I didn't let her finish. "Where is he?" Brent appeared in the hallway, his arms crossed over his chest like a wall. "Look, man, we did what we coulda." I didn't hear the rest. A sound came from below, soft, muffled, like a cough swallowed by darkness. My body moved before my mind could catch up, feet pounding down the stairs, every step echoing like a hammer on a coffin. The basement was half-finished drywall and concrete, a folding chair, and a pile of laundry that smelled of mold. And in the corner, under the flickering light of a single bulb, was Zeke. He was so small he seemed to shrink into the ragged towel beneath him, his ribs outlined like lines on a map, his eyes dull and pleading. A plastic bowl with a crust of dried water sat inches from his nose. I went to him and dropped to my knees. His tail thumped weakly, a half-hearted wag that broke my heart. I ran my hand over his side, feeling the ridges of his spine, the warmth of his trembling body. My throat burned. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "Hey." His eyes closed, and he sighed like he'd been holding his breath forever. I gathered him in my arms, his weight too light, too fragile. He smelled like old sweat and dust. I pressed my cheek to his head and felt my own tears drip onto his fur. My mind replayed every Friday night I'd opened my door for Logan, every Saturday morning spent making pancakes, every time I'd said yes without thinking twice. And now this betrayal, this wound I'd never seen coming. I heard Brent and Miranda at the top of the stairs. Their voices carried, hushed but sharp. "He's overreacting," Brent muttered. "It's just a dog. Just a dog." I stood slowly, my arms full of trembling loyalty and innocence. I turned to face them. Miranda's eyes were red, ringed with guilt she didn't want to show. Brent's face was a mask, pride mixed with defiance. I could have yelled. I could have screamed until my throat was raw. But something inside me went still, like a lake in winter. I met Brent's gaze and held it. "You locked him down here," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. No food. No water. For days. Miranda opened her mouth, but no words came out. Brent shifted, his arms falling to his sides. We didn't mean. I cut him off. You didn't mean to, but you did. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. I walked past them, each step measured, each breath a decision. At the top of the stairs, I paused. I've taken care of Logan for a year, I said. Every weekend. Without complaint. I never asked for anything. One time, I needed you. And this is what I get. Miranda started to cry, tears slipping down her cheeks in silent, bitter lines. Brent's jaw clenched. I didn't wait for excuses. I turned and walked out the door, the night air hitting me like a slap. Zeke's body shivered against mine as I reached the truck. I set him gently on the passenger seat, his head rolling to the side, eyes fluttering half shut. We're going home, I said. No more basements. I buckled him in, some part of me still caring about safety, and climbed behind the wheel. My chest felt like it was caving in, a pressure I couldn't name. I thought about all the times I'd given more than I had to give. About every smile, every nod, every time I'd been the one to say yes when everyone else said no. And in that dark, quiet cab, I realized I'd spent a lifetime believing that kindness was a currency that always came back with interest. But it didn't. Not here. Not with them. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the house, the lights warm and bright. A fortress of hypocrisy. I imagined Logan asleep in his room, unaware of the battle that had just been fought. A small part of me wondered how long it would be before he called me again, voice small and hopeful. Can I come over this weekend, Uncle Miles? And what would I say? Could I say yes? Could I open my heart again to a family that had taken and left me empty? The road stretched ahead, dark and silent. Zeke shifted, a soft whimper escaping his throat. I reached over and scratched behind his ears. I got you, I whispered. You're safe now. The town slept around us, streetlights blurring into comets. My phone buzzed Alyssa. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to her. Not yet. Not when her silence had felt like a betrayal all its own. I wondered if she'd even noticed I was gone. If she'd cared. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine. The house looked the same, but it felt different. I carried Zeke inside, setting him on the rug by the fireplace. He looked up at me with a trust that hurt. I knelt and rested my forehead against his. We're home, I said. We're home. In that moment, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about justice. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying, no more. No more giving until there's nothing left. No more pretending that love is unconditional when it's just convenient. No more being the one who always says yes. From that night on, I promised myself and Zeke that we'd never be left behind again. Justice isn't loud. It's slow, deliberate, and steady, like a drip of water eroding a rock. That's what I told myself as I sat at my kitchen table with Zeke at my feet and the folder in my hands. The folder wasn't fancy, just a manila one with a cracked spine and dog-eared corners, but inside was everything I needed. Photos of Zeke's ribs poking out like fence posts, vet records documenting dehydration and stress, time-stamped screenshots from the doorbell cam showing Miranda letting herself in and taking him. Every detail felt like a wound, but I made sure I had it all. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. I had spent a year being the good guy, the helpful uncle, the convenient neighbor. But that year had come at a cost I couldn't ignore anymore. I'd given so much of myself, all under the banner of family, and when I needed them, really needed them, they'd left Zeke to starve in a basement. That was the truth, and no amount of tears or apologies could change it. So I built my case. Not to punish them, but to protect the part of me that still believed in doing the right thing. I owed that to Zeke. I owed that to myself. Alyssa came in halfway through my quiet audit. She saw the folder, saw the vet reports and photos laid out like an indictment. Her eyes darted between the papers and my face. What's all this? She asked, her voice too light, like she already knew but hoped she was wrong. Evidence, I said simply. I'm done being used. She sighed and leaned against the counter, arms folded, the way she always did when she felt I was being unreasonable. Miles, they made a mistake. Don't you think you're taking this a little too far? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the lines in her forehead, the tightness in her lips. She wasn't on my side. Maybe she'd never been. A mistake. I repeated. Leaving a living animal to starve in a basement is a mistake? I took care of Logan for a year. Every weekend. Without asking for anything. And when I needed help, Just a tiny favor. Miranda couldn't even bother to feed our dog. Alyssa's shoulders sagged. I'm just saying, they're family. Maybe we should try to work this out instead of blowing it up. Family. That word felt like acid on my tongue. I shook my head, my jaw tight. Family doesn't treat family like this. Family doesn't leave a dog in a basement. Family doesn't write notes telling you to pay for a sitter when you've given them everything. No. I'm done, Alyssa. I'm done being their doormat. She opened her mouth to say something, but I turned away. The conversation was over. I gathered the photos and vet records into the folder and closed it, the snap of the metal clasp sounding final. I was setting boundaries now, and if that meant drawing a line between me and them, so be it. That evening, Miranda called. Her voice was tight, brittle. Miles, we need to talk. No, I said. I'm done. You can't just cut us off, she snapped. Logan. Logan is not my responsibility anymore, I said, my voice trembling with the effort it took to stay calm. I'm not punishing him. I'm protecting myself. And Zeke. Her silence on the other end was deafening. Then, the click of the line going dead. I let the phone drop into my lap and stared at the folder. Zeke lay at my feet, his head resting on my shoe, eyes half closed. He didn't understand any of it. He just knew he was safe now. And I promised him quietly, without words, that he'd never be left behind again. Brent called the next morning. His voice was sharp, accusing. You're punishing our kid, he said. Logan's crying because his favorite uncle won't see him anymore. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I'm not punishing Logan, I said. I'm setting boundaries. You and Miranda made choices. You left my dog in a basement. That's on you, not me. He tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. Don't call me again, Brent, I said. I'm done. I hung up, my hand trembling, but I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I wasn't carrying someone else's weight on my back. Alyssa accused me of being petty, of overreacting, of holding grudges. I didn't argue with her. I just looked at her and saw the space between us widening like a crack in a wall. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe I just ignored it. But now, with Zeke at my side and the folder on the table, I saw everything clearly. This wasn't about petty grudges. This was about respect, about whether or not I mattered to the people who claimed to love me. Justice isn't loud. It's slow. And it's fair. And as I sat there that night, the folder in front of me like a shield, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being used. I was done being the easy one. I was done being the man who always said yes. I was setting boundaries, and if that meant saying no to people who'd taken me for granted, then so be it. Because justice might be slow, but it's coming. They went online first, not me. Miranda posted a picture of Logan sitting on their front porch, tears streaking his cheeks, captioned, "Family should support each other, especially during tough times." She left out the part about the dog. She left out the part about Zeke starving in their basement. She left out the part where I was the only one who ever said yes to babysitting. I saw the post at work, the blue glow of my phone lighting up my desk like a crime scene. My hands trembled, not with fear but with something deeper, betrayal, rage, disbelief that they'd paint me as the villain when they'd been the ones to fail. I didn't rush to respond. I sat in the break room with my coffee, Zeke's photo on my screen. The crate, the note, the cold, hard evidence. I scrolled through my camera roll, Zeke's ribs, the vet records, the doorbell footage of Miranda walking into my house uninvited and taking him. My stomach turned as I thought of all the times I'd said yes, all the times I'd been there. And now this. Alyssa texted me. Did you see Miranda's post? People are asking questions. Her words felt like another betrayal, like she was more worried about the questions than the truth. I typed back. I'll handle it. Because I would. Because I had to. That night, after work, I went home to Zeke. He met me at the door, tail wagging slowly, his eyes still carrying the memory of that basement. I knelt down, wrapped my arms around him, and whispered, "They're not going to spin this, buddy. Not this time." His ears flicked, and he let out a low whine that felt like agreement. I sat at the kitchen table, the folders spread out in front of me like a case file. Every photo, every vet record, every timestamp was a bullet in the chamber. I wasn't going to stay quiet. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. I posted one photo, Zeke's crate, the note taped to it in thick black marker. Next time, pay for a sitter. No caption. Just the truth, cold and sharp. It spread like wildfire. Friends messaged. People from high school, old coworkers, even Alyssa's cousin messaged. They locked Zeke in the basement. The question wasn't accusatory, it was horror, disbelief. And then came the flood, people sharing their own stories of betrayal, of being taken advantage of by family. My phone buzzed like a beehive. I ignored most of them, but one stuck out. Officer Derek Malone, Marion County Animal Services. Saw your post, he wrote. Want to talk? 3 days later, I was sitting in a cramped office across from Derek. He wore a badge, but his eyes were kind, his voice steady. Are you willing to press charges? He asked. He had Zeke's file open, photos printed out, everything in black and white. No spin. No excuses. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. I want them held accountable. He nodded, scribbled something on a pad. It's not an easy process, he warned. Family cases are always messy. I leaned back, exhaling. Yeah, I know. He looked me in the eye. This isn't revenge, Mr. Grant. This is about doing what's right. Zeke was at my feet, his head on my shoe. I scratched his ears, and he sighed, a sound that felt like relief. I know, I said again. I just want them to understand they can't do this. Not to me. Not to him. That night, I sat in the living room, Zeke on the couch beside me. I stared at the dark window, my reflection staring back. Tired, worn, but resolute. Alyssa came in, arms folded. You're really going to go through with this? She asked, her voice tight. I nodded. Yeah, I am. Her shoulders dropped. What about Logan? He's innocent in all this. My chest ached at the thought of him, his small hand in mine, the way he'd called me Uncle Miles like I was his hero. I'm not punishing Logan, I said, but I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't see me. She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. This is going to tear everything apart. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. Maybe, I whispered, but it was already broken. The next morning, the post was everywhere. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some in support, some with questions. Miranda and Brent posted again, doubling down, spinning their own narrative. Family drama. Misunderstanding, they wrote. We're heartbroken. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had teeth now, and it was biting back. That afternoon, Derek called. I've filed the report, he said. We'll follow up. It might take a while, but you did the right thing. I thanked him, my voice steady, even as my hands trembled. Justice was slow, but it was moving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. Zeke nudged my leg, his eyes soft but alert. We're going to be okay, I told him. No more basements. No more silence. And as I sat there, phone buzzing, folder open, Zeke's quiet breathing filling the room, I realized I'd already won. Not because of the court case or the likes on a post, but because I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen to stand up and say no. And that, finally, felt like freedom. The lie started small, the way most lies do, just a flicker of doubt, a pause between words. Alyssa had said she'd stopped by to check on Zeke while I was gone. She'd said she'd made sure he was fed, watered, and walked. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she'd shown the kind of loyalty and care I'd always shown for her family. But something about her voice, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, made me wonder. So I checked. The doorbell cam footage didn't lie. The timestamp, the motion alerts, the steady, silent witness to every arrival and departure. I sat at my laptop, the screen glaring back at me like a judge. One click after another, I scrolled through the days I'd been gone. Nothing. No Alyssa. No familiar shape coming up the walkway. No key in the lock. No figure crossing the threshold. Nothing but silence. My heart sank, my breath catching in my throat. Zeke had been left alone. No one had come. I sat there for a long time, the footage replaying over and over like a punishment. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. Alyssa was in the kitchen, humming softly as she folded laundry. The normalcy of it all made my skin crawl. I walked in, the phone in my hand, and she looked up, smiling. Hey, she said, like nothing had happened. Hey, I echoed, my voice low. I tapped the screen, pulled up the footage. Did you stop by the house while I was gone? She blinked, her hands pausing mid-fold. Of course I did, she said too quickly, too lightly. I told you I would. I hit play, the silence stretching. The screen showed an empty porch. No motion. No visitors. Just the slow march of days while Zeke waited. Her eyes darted to the screen, then to me. I thought Miranda said she'd do it, she whispered. I was busy. Busy. The word hit me like a slap. Busy while my dog starved. Busy while my trust cracked and crumbled. Busy while I sat in hotel rooms thinking everything was okay. Busy, I repeated, my voice flat. She reached out a hand to me, but I stepped back. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling now. I had a lot going on. Work was crazy. I thought. You thought he'd be fine, I finished for her. My chest felt tight, like something was squeezing the air out of me. You thought someone else would take care of it. Like always. Tears filled her eyes. Miles, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. But it had. And nothing would change that. Zeke had been left in a basement, ribs showing, water bowl dry. And Alyssa, my wife, the person who was supposed to have my back, had lied to me. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just felt something inside me break, like a bone that had been cracked too many times finally giving way. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I need some time. She nodded, tears spilling over, but I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I grabbed my pillow, a spare blanket, and went down the hall. The guest room smelled of stale air and dust, like a space no one had lived in for a long time. I set my things down and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. Zeke patted in, his eyes full of questions. I reached down and ran my hand over his head. We're okay, I whispered. We're gonna be okay. But I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, I lay in the darkness, the house quiet around me. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a reminder that trust, once broken, doesn't mend with apologies. It's a fracture that never quite heals. I thought about every time I'd been the one to show up, for Alyssa, for Miranda, for Brent, for Logan. Every time I'd rearranged my life to make sure no one was disappointed. And now, when I needed someone, really needed them, they'd all been too busy. The next morning, Alyssa tried to talk to me. She knocked on the door, her voice soft, careful. Miles? Can we talk? I stared at the ceiling, the cracks in the paint like fault lines. Not now, I said. My voice was cold, distant. She sniffled, and I heard her footsteps retreat. I spent the day in a haze. Work was a blur, every phone call and email just noise. The only thing that felt real was Zeke's head on my knee, the slow rise and fall of his breathing. I couldn't stop thinking about that footage, about the empty walkway, the days that passed with no one coming. I wondered how many times I'd given my trust too easily. How many times I'd believed in people who couldn't be bothered to show up. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, the folder in front of me. The photos, the vet records, the footage proof of every lie. I felt like a prosecutor preparing a case, but this wasn't a courtroom. This was my life. And the jury was me. Alyssa came in, her eyes red, her hands wringing. Miles, please. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would get this far. I looked at her, my face unreadable. It got this far because no one thought it would. Because you all thought I'd just swallow it. Like I always do. She opened her mouth, but I shook my head. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep being the one who forgives, the one who forgets. I need to know that the people I love have my back. Tears slid down her cheeks, and she reached for me. Miles. I pulled away. I need time, I said again. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I don't know if I can trust you right now. Her face crumpled, but I didn't move. I watched her leave the kitchen, her sobs echoing down the hall. And still, I felt nothing but the cold certainty that everything had changed. That the people I'd given everything to couldn't even give me the truth. I reached down and scratched Zeke's head. He leaned into my touch, his eyes closing in relief. It's just you and me, buddy, I whispered. And in that moment, I knew I'd already started to build a new life. One where I was my own foundation. Where loyalty wasn't borrowed or begged for. Where I didn't have to wonder if the people who said they loved me really did. They didn't come at me with apologies. They came at me with a lawsuit. Miranda and Brent, standing in front of the courthouse with their lawyer, some slick-haired guy in a cheap suit, like they were the victims. They'd sued me for emotional distress and defamation, demanding $2,000 to compensate them for the online post I'd made about Zeke. The photo of the crate. The note taped in thick black marker. Next time, pay for a sitter. The truth, staring back at them, a mirror they couldn't stand to look into. I sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, folder in hand. The same folder. Photos, vet records, screenshots from the doorbell cam. Evidence that had become my shield and my sword. Zeke lay at my feet, his head resting on his paws. I was watching every movement with the kind of loyalty that makes you ashamed of every time you let him down. I reached down, ruffled his ears. It's just you and me, buddy, I whispered. He let out a soft sigh, and for a moment, the world felt bearable. Alyssa hadn't come with me. She'd said she couldn't take sides. That family was complicated. I didn't argue with her anymore. Some truths you can't talk people into. Some truths just sit there, heavy and immovable, like the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old carpet and stale coffee. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, took the bench with a sigh. Brent and Miranda sat across from me, eyes red from their rehearsed tears. Their lawyer stood, smirking like he'd already won. I didn't smirk. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, folder in my lap, my thumb rubbing the edge until it hurt. The lawyer went first, talking about defamation and emotional harm, about how I'd embarrassed them, cost them friendships, how I'd ruined their lives with my careless post. He pointed at me like I was a criminal. Miranda dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Brent sat stiff, his jaw clenched, playing the part of the wronged man. Then it was my turn. I stood, my knees trembling at first, but my voice steady. Your Honor, I began, my fingers brushing the folder. I'm not here to hurt anyone, but I will not be blamed for telling the truth. My dog, Zeke, was left in their basement. He was starved, dehydrated. I documented everything. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have evidence? I nodded, my hands firm now. I opened the folder and laid it out piece by piece. Photos of Zeke's ribs, vet records with the dates circled in red, doorbell footage of Miranda letting herself into my house, footage of her carrying Zeke out. Time-stamped. Irrefutable. The judge leaned forward, his tired eyes sharpening. Is this your dog? He asked. Yes, sir. He flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with every photo. Then he looked at Miranda and Brent. Did you lock this dog in your basement? Miranda's voice cracked. We didn't mean. Answer the question, the judge said, his tone hard. Brent shifted in his seat. Yes, he muttered, his voice low. But. No but, the judge interrupted. He turned back to me. Your counterclaim? I stood taller. I'm countersuing for vet bills, pain and suffering, and neglect. The judge nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. I've seen enough. Miranda's lawyer started to protest, but the judge cut him off. You locked a living animal in your basement. You neglected him. You took him without permission. You want to sue this man for telling the truth? Case dismissed. Brent's face went pale. Miranda sobbed. The lawyer slumped, gathering his papers like a man collecting the pieces of a broken game. The judge's eyes met mine. Mr. Grant, your evidence is strong. I'm forwarding this to the district attorney's office for review. My knees almost gave out. The room blurred for a second, Zeke's soft breath grounding me. Thank you, I managed to say. My voice felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. The judge nodded. Justice is slow, Mr. Grant. But it comes. As I left the courthouse, the sun felt too bright, the air too sharp. People bustled around me, their conversations and laughter foreign, like a language I couldn't understand anymore. Zeke walked at my side, his step slow but steady. I reached down and scratched behind his ears, the motion automatic, comforting. We did it, buddy, I whispered. He looked up at me, eyes soft, tail wagging once, twice. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. Not because it was over, but because I'd stood up. I'd told the truth. And the world hadn't collapsed. Outside the courthouse, reporters lingered, local papers, maybe a TV crew. I kept my head down, the folder clutched to my chest. I wasn't here for interviews. I wasn't here for a soundbite. I was here because they tried to trap me in a lie, and I'd walked right through it. The folder was my shield, Zeke my witness. I reached my truck, opened the door, and helped Zeke in. He curled up on the seat, his head resting on my thigh. I started the engine, the rumble steady, comforting. My phone buzzed. Alyssa. I stared at the screen, her name a reminder of everything I'd lost, everything I'd learned. I let it ring. Some conversations couldn't be had over the phone. Some conversations might never happen. The drive home was quiet, the sun setting in the distance like a promise of rest. Zeke slept, his breathing even and calm. I watched the road, the lines blurring together, the world rushing by. I thought about the years I'd spent being the easy one, the one who said yes, the one who never asked for anything. And I thought about the moment in that courtroom, the moment the judge had looked me in the eye and said, "Justice is slow, Mr. Grant. But it comes." That night, I sat on the porch with Zeke at my side. The stars blinked overhead, the air cool and still. I sipped my beer, the cold glass of comfort in my hand. I thought about Logan, about his small voice on the phone, about the way he'd cried when I said I couldn't watch him anymore. My chest ached. He was a good kid. None of this was his fault. But sometimes, to protect yourself, you have to step back. Sometimes the people you think you can count on are the ones who hurt you most. Zeke shifted, his head pressing into my leg. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. "We're okay now," I whispered. "They can't touch us anymore." The house behind me felt empty, the echoes of Alyssa's laughter long gone. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe she'd come back. Maybe she wouldn't. But I knew one thing. I'd drawn my line. I'd said no more. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand alone. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't come with a parade or a marching band. It's quiet, a slow tide washing away the lies, leaving only the truth. And in that truth, I found a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. As the night deepened, the stars multiplying overhead, I leaned back and let the quiet settle in. Zeke's breathing, the distant hum of the town, the slow rise and fall of my chest. This was enough. I didn't need anyone else's approval. I didn't need their apologies. I had the truth. And that was enough to carry me forward. Inside, the folder sat on the kitchen table, its edges worn, its contents damning. It wasn't revenge. It was a record, a map of every betrayal, every broken promise, every time I'd been the easy one. And now it was the proof that I wasn't the villain in their story. I was the survivor. Justice is slow, but it comes. And when it does, it's not about punishment. It's about healing. About saying, "I see what you did, and I won't let it happen again." That night, under the stars, with Zeke beside me, I promised myself that this was just the beginning, that I would build something new from the wreckage, that I would never again be the man who said yes to everyone but himself. And that, finally, was enough. Logan called me on a Thursday evening. I was at the kitchen table, Zeke sprawled at my feet, the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet house. The screen lit up with Logan's name, and for a split second, I hesitated. I could still picture his small face, the way he used to sit at the counter on Saturday mornings, kicking his legs, talking about dinosaurs or soccer. But everything was different now. I swallowed hard and answered. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He was crying, his voice a thin, trembling thread. "Uncle Miles? Why don't you want to see me anymore?" My chest caved in. I felt the weight of every decision I'd made, the lines I'd drawn, the boundaries I'd enforced. "It's not about you, Logan," I said, my voice catching. "It's the grown-ups. They made some choices that hurt me and Zeke. And I can't just pretend that didn't happen." He sniffled. But I didn't do anything." "I know," I whispered, my eyes burning. "You didn't. You're a great kid. And I miss you. But I have to protect myself right now. I have to take care of Zeke." Silence stretched between us, thick and painful. "I love you, Uncle Miles," he said finally. "I love you too, Logan," I whispered, my voice breaking. "More than you know." He hung up before I could say anything else, leaving me with the ache of his absence. Zeke lifted his head, his eyes dark and knowing. He nudged my leg with his nose, and I reached down, running my fingers over his soft fur. "We're okay," I said, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, him or me. A few days later, CPS called. A calm, professional voice on the other end. "Mr. Grant, I'm following up on multiple reports we've received. Neighbors, friends, even Logan's teacher. They're all concerned about his well-being." My stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "We're looking into it," she said gently. "Can you tell me anything that might help?" I closed my eyes, the memories flashing Miranda's red eyes, the slurred words, the pills, that basement, the way Brent's jaw had clenched when I'd walked away. I hesitated. I found Zeke locked in their basement," I said finally. "No food, no water. Just a towel on the floor. And Logan, he's always been left with me. Every weekend. I don't know what happens when he's there." The voice on the other end was calm. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. That helps a lot." When I hung up, I sat there in the quiet, the house pressing in on me. I thought I was done fighting. But maybe the fight wasn't done with me. I thought about Logan, his tears, his small voice, and I knew this wasn't just about Zeke anymore. This was about the kind of people I'd let into my life. The kind of people I trusted. Zeke shifted at my feet, his breathing slow and steady. I reached down and scratched behind his ears, my chest tight. "We're gonna see this through, buddy," I whispered. "No more basements. No more silence." The next morning, I called CPS back. "If you need anything else, anything at all, please let me know." I'll help however I can." The woman's voice was warm, grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. We may reach out again." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the sky with pink and gold. A new day, a chance to do things differently. I wasn't the villain in this story. I'd tried. I'd given everything. And now, finally, I was standing up. For Zeke. For myself. And maybe, even for Logan. The day I found the forgotten footage started like any other. Cold coffee, a tangle of emails, and Zeke at my feet, his head resting on my sneaker like a silent witness to the unraveling of everything I'd built. I'd thought I'd done everything I could to protect myself and him. Filed reports, pressed charges, set boundaries. But the feeling that something was unfinished gnawed at me like a loose thread. It was late, the sky outside darkening into that velvet blue that always made me think of high school football games and long drives home. I was in the living room, laptop open, the folder of evidence spread out like a map of every betrayal. My fingers hovered over the files, Zeke's photos, the vet records, screenshots of Miranda's cold smirk in the doorway. And then I saw it. A file labeled Logan Visits. A small motion capture folder from the living room camera I'd installed months ago when Logan started staying over every weekend. For safety, I told myself. Because sometimes kids do dumb things, spill juice on the carpet, climb on furniture, pull on electrical cords. I'd forgotten it even existed. I clicked it open. Grainy footage filled the screen. Logan on the couch, coloring. Miranda behind him, her movements jerky, blurred. I almost clicked away, guilt pricking at me for spying on a family moment. But something in her posture made me pause. Her shoulders slumped, her head low. She swayed. I clicked the audio on and turned up the volume. And that's when I heard it. Slurred words, a half laugh, the rattle of a pill bottle. "Just one more," she muttered, her voice thick and heavy. "Gotta get through the day." My blood went cold. Logan was right there, his small voice chatting away about dinosaurs. Miranda didn't answer him. She didn't even look at him. She was too busy counting pills in her palm, too busy taking them to notice the world spinning around her. I watched in horror as she swallowed them dry, her head rolling back, her eyes glassy. I sat frozen, the laptop screen glaring at me like a confession. All this time I'd thought the problem was neglect. Zeke left in a basement, Logan dropped off without a second thought. But this was something else. This was danger. A child left with a woman who couldn't even stand on her own 2 feet. Zeke whined softly, his tail thumping against the floor like he could feel the tension rolling off me. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My hand shook as I copied the footage onto a thumb drive. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about boundaries anymore. This was about Logan, about the kid who trusted me to keep him safe. And I'd been too busy licking my own wounds to see it. The next morning, I called CPS. The woman I'd spoken to before answered, her voice warm but professional. "Mr. Grant," she said, "we appreciate your cooperation." "I have something else," I said. "Footage from my living room camera. It shows Miranda, under the influence. Pills. Right next to Logan." Her tone shifted, serious and urgent. "Can you bring that in today?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I'll be there in an hour." When I arrived at the CPS office, the place felt sterile, white walls, bland chairs, the smell of old coffee. But the woman who met me, Ms. Ramirez, had eyes that were kind and tired, like she'd seen the best and worst of people and still managed to keep going. I handed her the thumb drive. She plugged it into her computer, and together we watched Miranda's glassy eyes, the slurred speech, the way Logan's small shoulders hunched as if he was trying to disappear. Ms. Ramirez didn't flinch. When the video ended, she closed the file and met my gaze. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. This changes things. We've had concerns, but this is proof." "Is he going to be okay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded slowly. "We'll make sure he is." Driving home felt like swimming through fog. Every streetlight blurred. Every car felt like it was coming too fast. Zeke sat in the back seat, head poking between the front seats like a quiet guardian. I reached back and scratched his head. "We did the right thing, buddy," I said, my voice trembling. "We did the right thing." That night, I sat on the couch, folder on the table, phone silent. I didn't know what would come next. If Miranda would show up screaming, if Brent would come banging on my door, if Alyssa would finally decide which side she was on. But I didn't care anymore. I'd done what I had to do. A week passed. No word from CPS. No calls from Miranda or Brent. Just silence, like the eye of a storm. Then, late on a Friday night, my phone rang. Ms. Ramirez. Mr. Grant, she said, her voice steady. Logan's been placed with Miranda's older sister in Eugene. We felt that was the safest option. I felt something in my chest loosen, like a knot untying. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you. She paused. He asked about you. I told him you did everything you could to protect him. My throat tightened. Thank you, I said again, my voice thick. Tell him. I love him. I will, she promised. After the call ended, I sat there in the dark, Zeke's soft breathing the only sound. I thought about all the times I'd carried other people's burdens, all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. And I realized that helping Logan wasn't about being a hero, it was about being honest. About choosing the hard thing over the easy thing. About standing up when no one else would. Zeke climbed up onto the couch, his head resting in my lap. I ran my fingers through his fur, the weight of everything lifting slowly, like dawn breaking. We did it, I whispered. We really did it. The next morning, the sun streamed through the window, warm and bright. I stood in the kitchen, making coffee, and for the first time in months, the silence felt like peace instead of punishment. Zeke sat at my feet, his tail wagging lazily, his eyes watching me with that deep, unwavering trust only dogs seem to know. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Miranda and Brent would come for me again, whether Alyssa would stay or leave, whether Logan would ever forgive me for stepping away. But I knew one thing. I'd chosen the truth. I'd chosen to stand up for the one who couldn't stand up for himself. And maybe that was enough. Maybe, in the end, that was all any of us could do. The folder still sat on the table, a silent testament to everything I'd fought for. I reached over and closed it, the click of the metal clasp sounding like the end of a chapter. Zeke barked once, a soft, happy sound, and I smiled. Let's go for a walk, buddy, I said, grabbing his leash. The morning air smelled like rain, fresh and clean. We stepped outside together, leaving the old stories behind, walking forward into something new, something better, something earned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Alyssa moved out on a Sunday morning, her footsteps soft and deliberate, the wheels of her suitcase whispering across the hardwood like a secret. She didn't look back at me. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke louder than any apology could. I stood at the kitchen counter, coffee cup in hand, Zeke by my side, watching as the life we'd built together unraveled thread by thread. She tried to take half, of course. Half the house, half the savings, half of everything that had been ours. But I had records, emails, receipts, payments I'd made, the debts I'd cleared. She got less than she expected, and none of my regret. In the end, the papers were signed in the lawyer's office, 2 chairs apart, a glass table between us. She didn't wear her wedding ring. I didn't ask why. Some questions have answers that hurt more than silence. Back home, I found Zeke sitting at the front door, his head cocked like he was waiting for her to come back. I knelt down, scratching behind his ears. She's not coming back, buddy, I whispered. He pressed his head into my chest, and I felt the old pain start to fade. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. Saturday morning stretched ahead of me like a blank page, no plans, no family obligations, no voice reminding me of what I owed. I filled them with long walks with Zeke, coffee that stayed warm because I wasn't running out the door to babysit Logan, and the slow, careful rebuilding of a life that had almost slipped through my fingers. People still asked what happened. At the hardware store, at the coffee shop, at the vet's office. Miles, what's going on with Miranda and Brent? And your wife? They'd lower their voices like it was a secret worth whispering, like they were entitled to every detail. I learned to smile, to say, it's complicated, and leave it at that. The truth was, the real story didn't fit into a soundbite. It was too big, too messy, too real. It was the kind of story that lived in the quiet moments, Zeke's head in my lap, the morning sun on my face, the way my own reflection in the mirror looked different now. Stronger, sharper, tired, but not broken. Every Saturday, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my coffee and the folder in front of me. Not to relive the past, but to remind myself of the lines I'd drawn. Photos of Zeke's ribs, the vet records, the timestamps from the doorbell cam. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined the betrayal. That I'd done what I had to do. Justice wasn't loud. It was the quiet strength to say enough. One Saturday, Logan called me. His voice was small, careful. "Uncle Miles? Aunt Michelle says I can see you again. Is that okay?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Of course it's okay, buddy," I said. "Whenever you're ready." He let out a breath that sounded like relief. "I miss you." "I miss you too," I whispered. The next weekend, he came over with a small backpack, his hair a little longer, his eyes a little older. I hugged him tight, felt his small arms wrap around my neck. "Zeke missed you," I said, ruffling his hair. He grinned and bent down to hug the dog, who wagged his tail like the world had just righted itself. We spent the day the way we always had, soccer in the backyard, pancakes at the kitchen counter, movie night with popcorn. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But when the credits rolled and Logan's head leaned on my shoulder, I knew everything had changed. I'd changed. That night, as I tucked him into the guest room, he looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Uncle Miles? You won't let them take me away, right?" My heart cracked open. "No, buddy," I whispered, smoothing his hair back. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." He nodded, his eyes closing. "I love you." "I love you too," I whispered back. Zeke and I sat in the living room after that, the glow of the streetlight spilling through the window. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness familiar and comforting. I thought about Alyssa, about Miranda and Brent, about every time I'd said yes when I should have said no. And I felt a strange kind of peace. Like I'd finally let go of the weight I'd carried for too long. Zeke shifted, his head on my knee, his breathing slow and steady. I scratched behind his ears, my eyes closing. "We did it, buddy," I murmured. "We really did it." The house was still and quiet, the kind of quiet that used to feel like loneliness. But now it felt like peace. Like a place I'd built with my own hands, where every inch had been earned, where every corner held a story I wasn't afraid to remember. A place where respect lived, where love wasn't a debt to be repaid, but a gift freely given. People still ask what happened. I tell them this. I helped for a year. Every weekend. Without complaint. I asked for one favor. They took my dog, starved him, then blamed me. That's when I knew it wasn't about family. It was about respect. And once that's gone, everything else fades too. On the last Saturday of the month, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise. Zeke lay beside me, his head on my foot, his tail wagging in his sleep. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to hold on to people who didn't want to be held, about all the times I'd shown up for people who never showed up for me. And I thought about Logan, his small voice asking for reassurance, his trust in me, his quiet belief that I'd always be there. And I knew one thing for sure. I would always show up for him. I would always show up for Zeke. And I would always show up for myself. Because in the end, respect isn't given. It's earned. And I'd finally learned to earn it for myself. Zeke shifted, his eyes opening, his tail thumping against the porch. I smiled and reached down to scratch his head. "Come on, boy," I said. "Let's get you breakfast." And together, we walked inside, ready to start a new day.